KAL HALAL YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI BAHASHAM Rakadash. I just said KAL HALAL, all praises. Yahweh, who they ignorantly call God. BAHASHAM, in the name. Yahawashi, who they ignorantly call Jesus Christ. BAHASHAM. You know? Rakadash, the Spirit Holy, through the Holy Spirit, through the Holy Spirit, and through Yahweh, in the names of Yahweh, Yahawashi, and through the Holy Spirit, all things can be done. This is another digital epistle to the 12 tribes of Israel, whether you're so-called Negro, Native, Latino, that's typically what we're known on the West Hemisphere, a Negro, West Indian, Native, Hispanic, Latino, or, you could be the scatter, Bantu or whatever. We're scattered all to the corners of the earth. Simple honors to the elders preaching, to the elders and apostles who've been laboring in this doctrine. Honors to any of the brothers preaching on the likewise doctrine, or any brother or sister who's believing, especially in these last days, man. We can feel it in our bones, man. We can feel the goosebumps, we're gonna be back home soon.
Imagine a world where the most powerful country on Earth in 2021 wasn't the United States, but rather Spain. And instead of setting up military bases just in their own country, they also set up bases all around the world. Lots of those bases are in former colonies, but also there's a bunch in the United States. Just imagine this. You zoom into Fayetteville, North Carolina, and you see a huge military base. But it's not a US military base, it's a Spanish base on American soil, with lots of homes for the Spanish soldiers and their families, powerful weapon systems, aircraft, all run by the Spanish military. Go inside of one of these bases and it's all Spanish restaurants. Americans can't come in here unless they work for the Spanish government. And then imagine 100 more of these, all throughout the United States on American soil, and hundreds of more throughout the world. Or shift the scenario a little bit. What if it was a country that wasn't our ally? A country like China? What if they had military bases, not in the US, but right up close to our border? Powerful weapon systems right off our shores in islands in the Caribbean. If you're an American, you have to imagine what that would feel like. If you're not an American, it's likely you already kind of know what this feels like.
And what better place would it be to stop this? You go to Habakkuk, you go to Habakkuk 2 and 5 and 6. Yeah, also, because he transgressed by wine, that by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be fulfilled, but it gathereth unto him all nations, and keepeth all people.
The United States has an extensive network of military bases outside of our borders, hundreds of bases. I've been fascinated for a very long time about understanding these US foreign bases abroad, but I've never actually taken the time to accurately map them. So let's do it. Let's map every single US military base around the world. It turns out that's a huge task.
Google Fi, a phone plan by Google. Fi has unlimited plans that fit your data usage.
This is the story of the men of the United States Army who made this project possible, and of man's never-ceasing quest for knowledge.
This is a full armored division. To give you an idea of size, each of those small
military
dark
is.
squares
Back in
includes more than
2018,
1,000 men.
1,200 independent accountants and analysts came in to try to audit the U.S. Department of Defense. Basically, try to get like a paper trail of how big this thing is, how much money it spends, etc. And the Department of Defense didn't pass the audit. Like they literally did not have the documents or the knowledge to really piece together a full scope of what this organization is, how big it is, how much money it spends. So
How does that sound, man? How does that sound? All these bases, you think, man, this gotta be expensive. It gotta be, and they can't even do an audit. They can't even do an audit on how much they spend. I mean, that's why they're military billionaires, man. There've been, people who not bill. That's not what I mean. I mean, like people who really just became multimillionaires to billionaires overnight, just based off the military, Space okay, a blank check. That's an abomination to the Lord. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe unto him that increaseth, that is not his. So he's using this thick clay, this debt, this money, this fiat money with no value, to increase what is not his. And how long? How long is this? A long time, man. This hegemony that they've been able to, eat off since World War II. And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, that thick clay is that debt.
And the Department of Defense didn't pass the audit. Like they literally did not have the documents or the knowledge to really piece together a full scope of what this organization is, how big it is, how much money it spends. So we don't know. Nobody knows how big the Pentagon is in all of its forms. All we do know is that objectively, it is one of the, if not the largest and most powerful organization on the planet and in the history of humanity. I mean, if you have an organization that's more
Yeah. Your pledges of wages, your heavy debt. I think the word's like, yeah.
powerful than the Department of Defense in the history of humans, like, let me know. I want to know about it. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing bigger and more powerful than the United States military in 2021. And much of the US military is not actually in the US, but it's actually outside of our borders, all around the world.
This post is somewhere in Germany.
Together a full scope of what this organization is, how big it is, how much money it spends. So we don't know. Nobody knows how big the Pentagon is in.
But I've never actually taken the time to accurately map them. So let's do it. Let's map every single US military base around the world. It turns out that's a huge task.
This is the story of the men of the United States Army who made this project possible, and of man's never-ceasing quest for knowledge.
This is a full armored division. To give you an idea of size, each of those small dark squares includes more than 1,000 men.
The United States military is bigger than any of us can really fathom. It's so big that even the US military doesn't know how big the US military is. Back in 2018, 1,200 independent accountants and analysts came in to try to audit the US Department of Defense, basically try to get like a paper trail of how big this thing is, how much money it spends, etc. And the Department of Defense didn't pass the audit. Like they literally did not have the documents or the knowledge to really piece together a full scope of what this organization is, how big it is, how much money it spends. So we don't know. Nobody knows how big the Pentagon is in all of its forms. All we do know is that objectively, it is one of the, if not the largest and most powerful organization on the planet and in the history of humanity.
And it says, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh and subdueth all things. And that's what so-called Edomites have been able to do. I mean, the Edomites have been able to do. The so-called self-proclaimed white man. In 1680, the self-proclaimed white man subdued all things. Or I'm not saying he specifically did that in that time, but he proclaimed himself in 1680, man, and he's really been doing all things. And he subdued all things to be able to get himself to that point, to be able to say, you know what, I'm gonna call ourselves purity, cleanliness. He called himself white, and he's been able to use the printing press and the sword to spread that influence. Subdueth all things as irons breaketh all these, it shall break into pieces and bruise. And it's done. It broke us into pieces. It bruised all the nations into pieces. And whereas thou sawest thy feet and thy toes a part of the potter's clay, and the part of iron, and the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. So as much as iron subdue all things, man, we're seeing inferior kingdoms. These inferior kingdoms, you know, well, at other points it's very strong militarily, economically. That's why America super iron. You know, but Greece can't do that. Like none of these EU places that got military bases all over the place like America. So America's a super iron, but especially Greece, because they're miry clay. As the toes, as the feet were part iron and part clay, so part strong economically, militarily, and part weak. So you got, certain horns that are strong and certain horns that are weak. And the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken, as whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man, and they shall not cleave one to another, as iron is not mixed with clay. Man, these people are fighting. And what's this? And in the days of these kings shall um, shall the power of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom that shall not be left to another people, but break shall break it into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Is this the white man? No. This divine kingdom is Israel. For as much as thou sawest that stone was cut out, yeah, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and it break into pieces of iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold, and the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain, and the interpretation therefore thereof sure.
If you have a organization that's more powerful than the Department of Defense in the history of humans, like, let me know. I want to know about it. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing bigger and more powerful than the United States military in 2021. And
So there's nothing more powerful in America 2020 in America. There's no more place military stronger than America. 2021, 2022. So that's why all these heathen have to come together to bring the beast
of the U.S. military is not actually in the U.S., but is actually outside of our borders, all around the world.
This post is somewhere in Germany, overlooking a sector of the Iron Curtain.
One of the first things that Joe Biden and his administration did when they came into power a couple of weeks ago down the road was ask for an assessment of how big is our military presence around the whole world? What is our strategy? And what actually does this presence look like?
The department will conduct a global force posture review of U.S. military footprint, resources, and strategies.
Footprint. I like that. That's like a nice thing. Like, what's our footprint? How big is our footprint around the world? We don't really know. The Pentagon is going to start to try to assess that. So let's help the Pentagon out and try to map every single United States base around the entire world. Let's do it. It wasn't too long ago when I used to think that having military bases in other countries was totally normal. Like, doesn't every country have like military bases in other countries? Yeah, anyway. This was sort of reinforced for me when I was in college. I did an internship at NATO, with the headquarters of NATO, which was in Brussels. To get this job, I had to get a secret security clearance from the US government in order to enter the military base, which was NATO. This was really cool because there was always like people coming through NATO that I got to meet, like my diplomacy hero, Madeleine Albright, who used to be the Secretary of State, or this guy.
It's a great honor representing my country abroad for the last 37 years.
Good old Joe. Hey, Joe. Had no idea you'd be president someday. Anyway, the big benefit of having this secret security clearance is that I could go into any military base, anywhere. And so on Saturdays, I would drive an hour from Brussels to a little village in the Belgian countryside where a military base had been sort of plopped down in the middle of the Belgian countryside, in between like stone walls and quaint streets and sheep and farming plots. Yeah, it's a little blurry in this map because it's, you know, a military base and sometimes they blur the satellite imagery. Nothing I can do about it, sorry. And as soon as I entered into the base, went through all the security and I was in the base, I felt like I had left Belgium and was suddenly entering suburban America.
Welcome to the United States.
There was a Taco Bell and movie theaters with American movies and all sorts of shops and like yoga studios and like a grocery store that had all of the products that I was very used to, all at the same prices I could get them in the United States, even though they had been flown across the Atlantic and brought to this place, which is a very expensive thing to do. It was a dream for me as a poor college kid living in Brussels and feeling a little bit homesick, to be honest. I hadn't really figured out culture shock at this point. So yeah, I kind of loved it. And I was, again, sort of like, doesn't everyone have military bases in other countries and they can sort of just go to their military base? And it was just, I was so naive. Alas, I've learned the truth. Luckily, I was able to talk to somebody who literally wrote the book on US military bases abroad.
Most US bases abroad look like lots of small US towns.
Over the years, David has been researching and compiling a database of all the US bases around the world. The result is a very detailed audit that hasn't really ever been done to this degree. In fact, a few years ago, the Pentagon's own research arm, the RAND Corp, was doing some research on military bases abroad. And instead of using the Pentagon's list of US military bases abroad, these guys used David's list. Like, they used David, he's a professor, he's like an anthropologist, he's not like a part of DoD, and yet they're like, this list that he made is actually more authoritative than like the Pentagon's own list.
I mean, I'm sort of honored, but it's not a good sign if the Pentagon research arm is using my list and not the Pentagon's own list.
So I got a hold of David's list and started wrestling with the data. And
Man, so what does that mean? That either means they got some shit they would really rather not claim, or like, man, this is just so crazy. That's just easier. Like, bro, like you can't even fathom.
I need a way to display it on a map so that I could get every single base to show somehow. After a few weeks of doing this, I finally have a map, and that map looks like this. Every dot on this map is a US military base or installation of some sort in a different country. Many of these dots are not placed exactly where the base is because many of these bases are clustered in areas, and if I tried to map them all in the exact spot where they really are, they would all just sort of stack on top of each other and you wouldn't really be able to see them. But these dots represent every single base outside of the United States, from huge complexes the size of Rhode Island to small airstrips, little facilities that only house American drones or radar or supplies. This is all of them, and at least all that we know of. And if you look at this map and you see a base that you know of that is not here, or one that is there that doesn't belong there, tell me about it. I want to know, because this is sort of hard information to ascertain. The Pentagon is not very transparent, and neither are host countries, about where certain bases are and why they exist.
Many of the bases around the world their existence is due to an agreement between the two countries that is often not open to the public, that is secret.
Any errors here are mine and not David's. All in all, the number here is about 750. 750 US military bases, big and small, outside of the United States. By outside of the United States, I'm including US territories that are not equal to the United States, like Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. But in reality, we probably don't know the real number because that data just simply is not transparently available to us. There are a couple major clusters here where the most bases exist. One major one is Germany, and the others are Japan and South Korea. These are basically holdovers from World War II and the subsequent Korean War, when the US, who won the war, came in and occupied these countries in order to set up a new government, write a new constitution, and to help the post-war transfer to a new government. But what's most interesting to me aren't these clusters that came about because of World War II, but instead the far-flung, sort of unexpected or little-known places that the US military has a little footprint, like all the dots in Africa, which have popped up in recent years as the US has expanded its presence there. These are usually small installations that hold maybe a few soldiers or mainly private citizens who are government contractors. And they mainly house things like drones or radar or weapon systems. You also have this cluster of dots deep in the Indian Ocean, which is the island of Diego Garcia, which I've talked about at length, about the US military's role in displacing hundreds of local people to set up a base there. Some of these dots are just airstrips, a runway in the middle of nowhere. And these runways usually belong to the host country, and the US just rents them for a period of time, like this facility in the middle of the desert in Oman. Places like this exist to hold supplies in case a war breaks out. So the US maintains these stockpiles of war supplies all around the globe so that they can strike at any point without having to ramp up a war economy at home. It takes away a lot of the friction from going to war.
They've made it easier for the US military to launch offensive wars. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were easier to launch because
Garcia, which I've talked about at length, about the US military's role in displacing hundreds of local people to set up a base there. Some of these dots are just airstrips, a runway in the middle of nowhere. And these runways usually belong to the host country, and the US just rents them for a period of time, like this facility in the middle of the desert in Oman. Places like this exist to hold supplies in case a war breaks out. So the US maintains these stockpiles of war supplies all around the globe so that they can strike at any point without having to ramp up a war economy at home. It takes away a lot of the friction from going to war.
They've made it easier for the US military to launch offensive wars. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were easier to launch because the US has maintained a huge infrastructure of bases.
Some of these dots don't represent a place where US
The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from the far. So we know that place, you know. That place, America, you know. A nation from, or a so-called white man, you know, came from Europe, you know, they came from a lot of places, but man, they came from a far area, man, to get to Jake. You know, they could have got Ham, they could have got a whole bunch of races, but they were focused on the children of Israel. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance which shall not regard the person old, nor will not regard not the person of old, nor shew favor to the young. And we're seeing, man, now that these people are swift, man, this is the eagle, man. They set up military bases, they don't gotta wait, man. These people are ready for war.
Soldiers are actually stationed, but instead it represents where money from the Pentagon has gone to influence or build up infrastructure. For example, in Iceland, the US is spending a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, to upgrade this airport, the airport that we all go through when we're going to Iceland, but doing it for military purposes so that the US can use it, can land there if needed. So next time you land in Iceland on your way to the Blue Lagoon, just know that you're passing by one of these little dots. Over here in the Azores, these islands that are owned by Portugal, nearly 2,000 kilometers away from any landmass, there is a group of US military installations mainly used for refueling and weapon storage. Head up here to Greenland, and you'll see a little base way up high, the most northern base in the world where 140 Americans live. Kind of looks interesting. I'd love to go there someday. Way out here in the Pacific, you've got loads of remote military bases owned by the United States. They're mainly small airstrips, like this base on the southern tip of this huge atoll of the Marshall Islands. All right, listen, I'm not going to explain every single base. There are 750, maybe 800. There's a bunch of bases. I just wanted to give you a flavor of what some of these look like. They're diverse. They're all over the place. And they're fascinating to me. I have been compiling accounts of people who live next to U.S. military bases. I have over 100 accounts from people that, from my call out on Instagram. I want more. I want to make an entire video about life next to a base. And that is why I'm calling upon all of you. I'm going to put a link in my description to like a survey. It's like a form of like what it's like to live next to a U.S. military base. I have it right here. And I'm going to be checking it. You can fill out this form, and then I will get your response. And I will read through your response. And I will use that to construct an understanding of what life is like next to a U.S. military base. I talked to David a bunch about this too. He's done a bunch of research, done a bunch of interviews, and I want to keep talking about this. So if you don't live next to a military base, I want to hear from you, like, what are your thoughts about this? Whether you're an American or not an American, like, does this seem right? Does this seem like the right choice, the right thing for our taxpayer money to be going towards? I'm still making up my mind on a lot of this stuff, and I want to start a discussion. My goal in this video was to just map it, was to just look at it, be able to see it on a map. And I've finally done that. By the way, there will be a high-res version of this map on my Patreon for patrons who sign up for the map background tier. That will be there. So I will be in the comments more than normal for this video, and I want to hear from you. Before you go, I want to say thank you to the people who gave me a lot of footage for this piece. I didn't go out into the desert and the ocean to film for this video. I got a lot of it from Storyblocks, who's the sponsor of today's video. Storyblocks has supported this channel for a long time, and I'm very grateful because Storyblocks is a place where you can get loads of amazing footage. Like, this video would be half as visually interesting if I didn't have a lot of this footage. But it's not just stock footage. Storyblocks is full of literally over 1 million assets, from sound design assets like sound effects or After Effects templates that you can use to make animations, and then loads of beautiful high-res 4K footage that you can download, wait for it, unlimited amounts if you're a subscriber. Like, you just subscribe, you pay one price a month, and you can download as much as you want of this like really good stuff. I've been using Storyblocks as long as I've been making professional video, well before they ever came to sponsor. That link helps support this channel, but it also gives you access to this amazing library of assets. Thank you, Storyblocks, for supporting this channel, for supporting my work, and thank you all for being here. I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bethany made me feel that I have more than a job. I have
Please welcome to the stage John Perkins.
Indonesia, Ecuador, Panama, members of the Royal House of Saudi Arabia. And I've said something like, in this hand, I have millions of dollars for you and your friends if you play our game. In this hand, I have a gun, in case you decide not to. Now, my words were more diplomatic than that, but that was the message. I was an economic hitman. We economic hitmen have created a new global economy, really, a form of capitalism that I call predatory capitalism. It isn't working. We all know this. The oceans are rising. The glaciers are melting. Less than 5% of us live here in the United States, and we consume almost 30% of the world's resources, while half the world is on the verge of starvation, or actually starving. That's not a model. China can't do it. India can't do it. They're trying, but they can't do it. We have to change. We have to have a revolution. We must change the system. I'll get into that in a minute, but first, how did I become an economic hitman? While I was still in business school, I was interviewed by the National Security Agency, the NSA. They put me through a series of extensive psychological tests, including on a lie detector. It's a long story, but to make a long story short, I ended up going in the Peace Corps and being sent deep into the Amazon rainforest. Now, I'd grown up the son of a teacher in a...
Man, so you see, this is not the first time peace is going to be said, so I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that word, but peace is a common theme.
Prep school for very wealthy boys in rural New Hampshire. I grew up with lots of snow and cold, kind of like here in the winter, you know, and suddenly I find myself living in a thatched roof hut in the steamy jungle, You think I adjusted easily to that? after, after the Peace Corps, I then took a job. I was given a job as an economist at an international consulting firm in Boston with close ties to the NSA and the CIA. I was trained by a woman named Claudine Martin, whose job it was to train me to be an economic hitman. Now, Claudine had seen my NSA files. She knew that I wanted three things that I thought all my prep school buddies, the rich kids, had: money, power, and sex. Claudine was really good at her job. And she promised me the first two: money and power. And she taught me quite a bit about the third. And then she told me what my job would entail. I would go to countries with resources our corporations covet, like oil. I'd arrange a huge loan to those countries from the World Bank or sister organizations, but the money wouldn't actually go to the country. It would go to our corporations, Bechtel, Halliburton, Brown and Root, familiar names, to build big infrastructure projects in those countries and incidentally make huge profits in the process. They'd build power plants and industrial parks, things that would benefit a few wealthy families in the country, the ones that own the industries. But the majority of the people would suffer. They would be left holding a huge debt they couldn't repay. So we go back and say, since you can't pay your debt, sell your resource, oil or whatever, real cheap to our corporations. Privatize. Sell your utilities, your schools, your jails, everything like that to our corporations. And Claudine also told me that if the leaders of these countries refused my offer, people she called jackals would be right behind me. I didn't actually carry a gun, but the jackals did. My first assignment was in Indonesia, a country that had just ended a terrible civil war where more than 1 million people had been killed. It had a terrifying reputation.
So if you wonder, man, these people talk about your shithole countries and they're so poor and why can't you get a corrupt president? You know, you got people in Africa talking about, oh man, we need your people. We need your people in Haiti, man. We need to go pay them to go kill our people in Africa. Which, like, you know, it's like a mock. It's like you're saying, oh, we need help, but it's like mockery. Like, oh, you're killing the president, man. That's almost, you know, internal family beef. But it's really like, no, man, that's really a problem with y'all leaders, man. Because at least in there, if they're getting overthrown, it's basically the leader rejected. Your leader said, no, I got too much morals for this. I can't do this anymore. And they remove him. KAL HALAL YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI 144. So it's not to really, like, you know, not to like cause any more, like, not to harp on the internal strife between you know, Israel, but it's really just about, you know, sometimes people say something it may almost like a backhanded compliment, but it's like, hey man, none of these are ours, man. We got to stop identifying with these countries and return back to the heritage given to us by the Lord, man. These people keep playing.
And I have to admit that when I arrived in Jakarta, knowing I'd be there for about 3 years, my knees were shaking pretty bad. My stomach was filled with fluttering butterflies. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I was a very young man. I just knew that I was expected to produce a report that would convince the Indonesian government to build an extremely expensive electrical system, hiring our corporations to do it.
You probably eat money.
Claudine had made it sound simple, even kind of James Bondishly romantic. But now I'm struck by reality, and I felt naive, ill-prepared, vulnerable. Fortunately for me, the winner of the Civil War, President Suharto, who was actually a dictator, wanted the projects that I was offering, and he also wanted CIA and Pentagon protection. And so every time I stumbled, and I stumbled often, somebody was there to pick me up. A government official would appear with an incredible report that would indicate beyond any shadow of a doubt that electricity was all the country needed to take off to huge growth. And a Harvard-trained mathematician showed up with a mathematical formula that proved that if they just built this electrical system, everything would be fine. In the end, I produced a report that forecast the need for electricity at an unheard of annual rate of 19%. Indonesia got its loan. Our corporations made lots of money, and I was promoted from economist.
Man, you hear that, man? This kid was nonsense. This man just wanted power, money, and women and sex. He didn't say women. He wanted sex. You know how, man. You know how these boys get down. We can't assume they like women, man. But man, the end of the wicked contrasts to that of the righteous. Truly, God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet um, were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slept. For I was envious of the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked man. And that's what these Jacob are seeing, and they sign away their country. All we need is electricity. Man, if they're there, you clearly have something of value, and you should cut them much yourself. I mean, it's not like you really have any option to overthrow or whatever, kill or be killed. But when you think you have no option, you sign up, man. You see the amount of poverty that your people is brought to, you can't stand it anyways. But that was King David, man. When he saw the wicked, he was envious for a little bit. Man, that's how we need to fight that, man. A lot of people can't come into truth because they're just too envious of the wicked, man. They envy their prosperity, and they cannot live life without having that white man money. You know? having that or that level of prosperity that they see white people have, man. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They have not, they are not troubled as other men, neither are they plagued like other men, man. And this is how you know, man, because he was not prepared, he was nervous, but the prosperity of the wicked, that Jake was, was geeked by, and just him, he might be a Jake, but him he's not playing like other men. He just got this job. He just shitted his way through the prosperity of America. Basically, took him away in prophecy, man. And it's prophecy. Therefore, pride compasseth him as a chain, and violence covereth him as a garment. The eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than their heart could wish. They are corrupt, and they speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongues walketh towards earth. Behold, these are ungodly, for who prosper in this world, they increase its riches.
The chief economist. It was quite a lesson. At that time, the Cold War was just really, really revving up. And Washington believed that Cuba was about to spread communism throughout the hemisphere. The CIA developed a program called Operation Condor to support right-wing dictatorships in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, throughout the continent. Jaime Roldos, president of Ecuador, democratically elected, and Omar Torrijos, head of state of Panama, strongly opposed Operation Condor. I was sent down to get them to change their ways. They wouldn't. They refused. Roldos was killed when his private plane crashed in what many believe was not an accident. Torrijos said, "The CIA killed my friend Jaime. I'll probably be next." In less than 3 months, he died when his private plane crashed under very similar circumstances. You're going to hear after me, after the break, from a Marine Corps general who was in Panama at the time, and he agrees with me that these were probably, at least Torrijos was probably assassination. We don't really know who caused it. And I want to say that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in some overarching conspiracy to take over the...
And he worked in here. He had experience with these people saying I'll be killed, and they were, man. And he worked in this field, man. He got experience. The sea theories.
But I do read reports. I think I'm a conspiracy factualist. I read just recently declassified information, the CIA's own website, where they admit that the U.S. government was deeply involved in the overthrow or assassination of Prime Minister Mossadegh of Iran, President Allende of Chile, Arbenz of Guatemala, Diem of Vietnam, Lumumba of the Congo. And speaking of Allende of Chile, he was replaced by the terribly brutal dictator General Pinochet.
Congo, since 98% are Bantus, are Israelites. We don't go into that.
Who was a great defender of Operation Condor and also oversaw the murder of tens of thousands of his people, and was praised by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger as a great defender of capitalism. I believe in national security, and I don't believe that U.S. security is served. I believe it's jeopardized when our agencies overthrow or assassinate the leaders of other countries because they don't follow our policies. I'm a capitalist. I think that capitalism has given us incredible technology, art, science, medicine. I think it holds out the hope for the future. But there's this new form of capitalism that I call predatory capitalism that's the enemy of true capitalism. Let me explain. When I was in business school, I was taught that a good CEO makes a decent rate of return for his company and also makes sure his company is a good citizen. He pays his workers a fair wage, gives them health insurance and retirement pensions, pays taxes, imagine that, and supports local school and recreational facilities and so on and so forth. And in essence, he makes sure that his company serves a public interest. That all changed in 1976 when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in economics and stated, amongst many other things, the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. It changed everything. And it has created this global fiasco, what I believe we're headed toward this disaster where we're in it a lot now with the climate change, with all the things that we all know is happening, and we must change that. And we can change that. How? I think the American Revolution actually offers an interesting example. Back in 1773, most everybody in the United States believed that the British were invincible. But George Washington stepped forward, and he remembered 20 years earlier during the French and Indian War, he had witnessed at the Battle of the Monongahela the defeat of a huge, powerful British army by a handful of Indians. And Washington said, they're not invincible. All we got to do is hide behind trees. Change the rules. So I think that's where we're at today. Change the rules. I like the rules I learned in business school, that a good corporation, a good CEO should make sure that his corporation serves a public interest, is a good citizen. I like the idea that you and I should invest in corporations that instead of essentially destroying the resources upon which our economy is based, instead of doing that, they clean up pollution, regenerate destroyed environments, develop new technologies for more efficient energy, transportation, communications, and just about everything else. In essence, let's get our corporations to create an economic system that is itself a renewable resource. Are you ready to do that? Yes, I think we're all ready. We can create this renewable resource. So our corporations today really run the world. They control most of the politics in this country and just about everywhere else. But it's important to remember that they need us. We work for them, we manage them, many of you own them, you run them. They depend on us to buy their goods and services, to invest in them, to work for them, to support them through our tax dollars. We have the power. You have the power. Earlier, we heard this incredible music about our passion and our power. Let's put our passion to work. This brings us to you. What is it you can do, each and every one of you? What can we all do? Well, I think perhaps the most important thing to start off by saying is that we are living at a time in history when the individual, you, has more power than ever before. I travel a great deal around the world, speaking at events like this and many others. And everywhere I go, whether it's in Asia or Africa, South America, Europe, Middle East, United States, people are waking up to the fact that we live on a very tiny, fragile space station with no shuttles, and it's headed for disaster, and we got to turn it around. We can do it. So in my latest book, which is for sale out here, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I have a whole section devoted to what you can do, lists and ideas. But I want to just mention 3 of them here today, kind of in summary. So remembering that we have this power today, especially with the internet. Number 1, search out and spread, shine a light on the story behind the story. I think my life demands that you and I look for the story. It demands laws, global laws. Do it. Get involved, please. This is something important that we all can do. And number 3, help a corporation understand that it must serve a public interest. Corporations, I think you and I, not everywhere else, but it's important to remember that they need us. We work, offers an interesting example. Back in 1773, most everybody in the United States believed that the British were invincible. But George Washington stepped forward, and he remembered 20 years earlier during the French. Let me explain. When I was in business school, I was taught that a good CEO makes a decent rate of return for his company and also makes sure his company is a good citizen. He pays his workers a fair wage, gives them health insurance and retirement pensions, pays taxes, imagine that, and supports local school and recreational facilities and so on and so forth. And in essence, he makes sure that his company serves a public interest. That all changed in 1976 when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in economics and stated, amongst many other things, the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits, regardless.
He, Genesis 9:6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Oh man, that messed up. Wrong verse. It says, Deuteronomy 24:15. You must pay. Yeah, let's just read the New Living Translation. You must pay the wages. You must pay them their wages each day before sunset, before they are poor and are counting on it. If you don't, they might cry out to the Lord against you, and it would be counted against you the sin. Man, he's telling that's fascinating. Because they're praying, man, you pray, man, imagine, man, that person was a faith, man, and they've been trying to hold on, man, they've been praying, holding on, man, they've been in that situation, you know, 5 men you destroy their country, man, they just start robbing, they have to start, murder, that's kind of against you, caused that situation, that's kind of against them too, but mainly of you.
The social and environmental costs. It changed everything. And it has created this global fiasco, what I believe we're headed toward this disaster, where we're in it a lot now with the climate change, with all the things that we all know is happening, and we must change that. And we can change that. How?
And what, these people don't care, like, I mean, we go into Obadiah 1. We go into these corporations. They don't care. This is the vision of Obadiah. Thus saith the Lord, um, God, thy power, concerning Edom. Um, we have heard a rumor from the Lord Yahweh, an ambassador sent among the heathen. Arise and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And why wouldn't he be greatly despised after all that, man? Everything that they're doing. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, the cleft of the rock, thou thy cleft of the rock, thy habitations high, man. These skyscrapers, man, and they always put all these skyscrapers, man, in these cities, man. Make them look more like America, man. That saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalted thyself as the eagle, thou set um thou though thou set thy nest amongst the stars, hence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. If these come to thee, if if robbers by night, how art those cut off? If they not have stolen till they had enough. And so unless you, man, until these men are cut off, man, these people are gonna keep stealing, man. If the grape gatherers come to thee, will they leave some grace, man? We know about them, man. Man, in slavery, you go work at Walmart, man. All the things that are broken, can they say, hey, bro, you could just have that, bro? You know, we're gonna file this in the claims anyway, so you might as well just you got it. You have the one little thing is destroyed out of this whole thing. So we gotta put the whole thing. We gotta put all the units in the claims. You gotta have that one little bottle since the, like one little can of soda or some drink because one of the in a pack one of them broke. No. Oh, can you have grace on the plantation? No. Northern Kingdom know about that. Southern Kingdom know about that. How are these things Esau sought up? How are his hidden things searched up? Man.
In essence, we economic hitmen in the last have created the world's first truly global empire. And we've done it unlike any other empire through economics. In essence, we economic hitmen in the last 40 years have created the world's first truly global empire. And we've done it unlike any other empire through economics, not through the military for the most part. So it's been done in secret. And I did this for 10 years, all the while struggling with my conscience as I did it, and yet never doing anything illegal. What economic hitmen do should be illegal, but it's not. And after 10 years, I decided I had to get out. I started several times to write the book, which became Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but each time I was bribed and threatened and did not write the book. I accepted some large bribes, which I put toward nonprofit organization, Dream Change Coalition, that works with indigenous people in many of the countries I'd ripped off. So I assuaged my guilt by using this money in good ways. And
Well, he said the world's first global. He said the world's first global empire. Yeah. So I was yeah. All right. So this is when Jacob tricked him, Esau, I believe. Therefore, I mean Jacob tricked Isaac. Supplanted, but it was really his birthright. So yeah. God, Lord ordained it. This is just the story that the Lord chose to convey it, to us. So therefore, God, thy power, will give thee. I'll just say it, man. This is Isaac, so we know. Therefore, Yahweh, BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI will give thee the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, man, and plenty corn. Well, the corn goes into grain, so don't don't go trip out. Don't go trip out. But I mean, it's this speaking of corn, because we know these people got the corn in the Americas, man. The corn is indigenous to the Americas. Solomon had access to it because America's over, and he had he had he had missions over here. I took 3.5 years. Year half here, year half back. So Solomon had corn. They knew what corn was. We maize is uh, the Hebrew word, and corn. Is how we could definitely identify our people. But grain, wine. But the riches, the resources. But that's what the corn and wine, man. That's what these people are having, man. Let people serve thee, thy nations bow down to thee, and be Lord over thy brethren. And David did fulfill this, man. Let thy son and let thy mother's son bow down to thee, man. That's the Edomites, man. Cursed be everyone that cursed thee, and blessed be everyone that blessed thee. All right. So that's what was given to Jacob, man, the dominion over all the Israel, all the heathen, including his brother, man, and giving his line the forever promise, you know. So, man, so when he stole his birthright, when he said, and Isaac trembled, um, and Isaac his father said unto him, Who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, and said, Who? Where is he? Hath taken thy venison and brought it to me. I have eaten of all before thou camest, and blessed him, and he shall be blessed. And when Esau heard these words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, my father. Um, and he said, Thy brother come with subtlety and taken away my blessing. And he said, he um and he said, Is he not rightly called named Jacob? For he has supplanted me 2 times. So what's that 2 times? When he stole the birthright. So that means you sold it, man. He just went to cash in on something you already sold, man. It's not like you just sold it, man. You told you, well, what shall I do you if you're dead, man? You couldn't think eternally. You were thinking fleshly and immediately. You didn't care. So he supplanted me 2 times. He took away the birthright from me, and behold, now he hath taken away from me a blessing, and said, Hast thou not reserved the blessing out for me? And he sold it. He supplanted you. He finessed you. And you still complain. You still crying? Yeah. And Esau and Isaac answered answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him lord over thy brethren, and his brethren and all his brethren have I given unto him for servants. With corn and wine have I sustained him. So what shall I do now unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac and his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be thy fatness of the earth, man. Let me slow that down. Man, so he's saying right here, Isaac's saying, Isaac said unto Esau, Behold, I made him Lord, man. I given all his I gave him the dominion of all the heathen and the resources forever. I gave him that eternal priesthood. And Esau saying, well, Father, man, you only have one blessing. Can you bless me? Also, he's crying, man. So man, he had to come with some makeshift. So what can you give when you gave somebody everything already for eternity? What can you give to somebody? And Isaac said to his father, and Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, the fertile. Man, here you go, man. Let's say his fatness, the fat piece, man. You want that fat chicken wing? You want that fat corn, man? You want that fat? Yeah, you want that, man. You want that, you want your cattle to be fat, man. You want that weight, you want that meat, man. You don't want no, you want a fertile place, man. You want richly prepared food, fatness, fat piece, man. You want the oil, you want the olive oil, man. And we know the oil, man. They got it. Petra, Russia, yeah. Anywhere the oil, man. Edomites is there fighting over it. The sprout, the vigorous, the fertile spots, the places, man. And they placed all their military over here, man. Fatness of the earth and the dew of the heaven above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, man. So he got to kill, man. By the sword, man, he got to grind to the world dominion. By the sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, and thou that thou break his yoke off from his neck. So she's talking about, man, he had the dominion, man. I mean, he would live by the sword, and then you know, he and David would put him in put him in slavery, man. Like he did with all the heathen, and you know, it came to pass where where after King Solomon, you they got out of captivity, man, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing within his father.
Happened. And on 9/11, I was deep in the Amazon with the Shwa people who are head shrinkers. If you've ever seen a shrunken head, they did it because they're the only people that do. I was in there with a group of North Americans who were learning from the Shwa on 9/11. As soon as I came back to the United States, I went up to ground zero. And as I stood there looking at that smoldering pit, and you could still smell the burning flesh, I knew that I had to write this book because I knew that the American people have no idea of what our foreign policy is based on. And I knew I had to speak out to that the American public had to understand why there's so much fear and anger and hatred directed at us around the world, which is not to condone Osama bin Laden or mass murder, but it is to
See, he made you despised amongst the heathen.
say that I knew the American people had to understand. And then I drew back on the shamanic teachings that I'd had all these years and the other books I'd written about on shamanism and indigenous cultures who all say that we can create change, we can create shapeshifts, we can create huge changes, and that in fact we've entered this time of change where we have the tremendous potential for this. And I realized at that moment, standing there at ground zero, looking down into this pit, I realized that this is where it all comes together, and that my obligation as an ex-economic hitman was the same as my obligation as someone who's trained with shamans around the world and has been teaching workshops on this. It's about transformation. It's about making this world a better place for my daughter and all her brothers and sisters all over this globe.
People behind the whole thing, those who paid money, those who mobilized all the resources. Justice will also go as far as explaining who procured the AK-47 that was carried by Jabulani Kayinkane Mdunge. It will also go as far as explaining who procured and bought the Mercedes-Benz, as we are told that is what it was bought through a slush fund of crime intelligence. Will the counterintelligence report be released in this court? Will it be declassified so that the whole truth will be told of what really happened, how our friend was killed, how our comrade was brutally assassinated by hitmen that were procured, hired by my own organization, the ANC, that have turned into a political mafia.
My Lord, as a younger generation in the struggle, we sing the songs those who came before us sang to put ourselves in the position they were before. And like we said, our songs are not in any way engaged in any
Man, so rushed at that 144 call. Like, yeah, BAHASHAM like, man, this is what he does, man.
The biggest nuclear weapon the US detonated wasn't in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. It was in the Marshall Islands. It was here in these atolls located halfway between Hawaii and Australia that the US detonated a weapon codenamed Castle Bravo, and it was
about 1,000 times the force of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
The Marshall Islands is mostly made up of atolls, which are ring-shaped coral reefs with a lagoon in the middle. And some of these atolls were still inhabited when the nuclear fallout dropped from the sky onto people's bodies.
My cousin Erosi, he was on top of a tree whenever the powder fell. He died when he was a teenager.
In fact, the US tested 67 nuclear weapons in the Marshall Islands, and the damage they caused was unthinkable.
Malformed babies, jellyfish babies, some people call them.
The long-term side effects are still hurting people to this day.
Cancer rates in the Marshall Islands, in the Marshallese community, are higher than the general population.
And after testing nuclear weapons on their islands, the US studied the Marshallese people without their consent.
The United States chose us to be guinea pigs to develop their weapons.
The Marshall Islands gained its independence from the United States in 1979, but when it was a US territory, it was abused as a testing ground for nuclear weapons.
The world is afraid of America because of that hydrogen bomb was created in the Marshall Islands. I'm still thinking, why Marshall Islands? Why us?
Nason Locken is a nuclear survivor, who like many other Marshallese has now moved from the islands to Arkansas. She was just a year old when the Castle Bravo explosion detonated, and she was directly affected by radiation growing up on the contaminated Rongelap Atoll.
I remember people get really, really sick all the time. Sick with thyroid, sick with cancer. I was angry because a lot of my cousins, like my cousin Liggett, he went back in a box.
From 1946 to 1958, the US tested 67 atomic weapons in the Marshall Islands. None more destructive than Castle Bravo, tested in 1954. The US Army actually wasn't expecting the Castle Bravo explosion to be as big as it was. The materials used in the weapon actually fissioned in such a way that the bomb nearly tripled its yield and drastically expanded the blast radius.
Camera position, 50 miles at 10,000 feet.
And then there was the wind. It blew in a different direction than what the scientists expected, and carried nuclear fallout to nearby populated islands.
Even so, the winds were within the area of acceptable fallout.
That's the word they used, acceptable fallout.
On the atoll's upper islands, this H+5 to H+50 hour dosage ran from possibly 1,500 to 3,000 Roentgens, well above the lethal human dose.
The devastation was massive.
The frame size of the picture is 14 by 18 miles. The film is running at normal speed.
Nason wasn't on Rongelap that day. She was on nearby Kwajalein Atoll where the US Army had set up a base camp. But Nason's family was on the exposed island, and she described what her family saw.
My uncle John Anjine, he was having coffee 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and they saw a bright light. Smoke went up all the way up to the cloud. And then when it reached the cloud, it explodes. It was louder than thunder. They were so scared. The woman and children ran into the bush and hid there.
According to her family, that's when the powder started falling.
Fallout of the radioactive particle now begins for a period of 10 hours or more.
My cousin Erosi, he was on top of a tree whenever the powder fell. And he ran to the ocean because he was burned all over. And it got worse. Nobody told him anything. All day long and all night long, the powder fell on the island. People were sick.
And that thou shalt take up this parable against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased, the Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked, and the scepter of the ruler, he who smote the people in a continual rout. Who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He hath ruled the nations in anger and persecuted, and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet, and they break forth in singing. Yeah, the fir trees at thee, and the cedar of Lebanon saying, since thou have laid down, no follower has come against us. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming, and stirred up the dead, and even all the chief ones of the earth, all the kings, and all the dead are the heathens, because they can't accept, they can't receive the truth, so they'll never know what it's like to truly live, at least on this side. The covenant is not made with them, but it will be dealt with how they follow along, according to the law. All the chief ones of the earth it hath raised up from their thrones, all the kings of the nations, and they shall speak and say unto thee, thou art weak as we, thou art become like us. And what are they talking about saying? No, it's talking about a man, Esau. Thy hump has brought thee down to thy grave, thy noise of thy bowels, the worms have spread under thee, thy worms have covered thee. O art thou the son of Lucifer, fallen from heaven? O Lucifer, the son of the morning, thou hast cut down to the ground which just weakened the nations. And they're dude, man, they're watching. They're gonna see America get nuclear destroyed, man. They were probably watching those bombs that just like holy shit.
Diarrhea, stomachache, ache all over their body. The next day, their hair fall out.
The majority of those receiving the heaviest radiation reported some transient nausea on the first or second day. Some loss of hair was a frequent symptom. Most of the Marshallese in this category developed multiple skin lesions, predominantly on the scalp, back of the neck, and feet.
On the third day, a ship came, and a seaplane came, and this guy named Oscar Dubroom said, everybody get on board. If you're thinking about staying back, you're gonna die. So everybody got on board.
229 Marshall Islanders and 28 American service personnel were evacuated to Kwajalein for survey and treatment.
Hundreds of lives were harmed and disrupted, all to test these deadly bombs. And this history of colonization and destruction isn't taught in American classrooms.
The Marshall Islands is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Benedict Madison wants to make sure that both Marshallese and Americans don't forget about this history.
Around World War I, Japan took over the Marshall Islands.
The Caroline and Marshall Islands, which were mandated to Japan after the World War, and which she seized for her own when she left the League of Nations.
They were
and hide there.
According to her family, that's when the powder started falling.
Fallout of the radioactive particle now begins for a period of 10 hours or more.
My cousin Erosi, he was top of a tree whenever that powder fell. And he ran to the ocean. This was burned all over. And it got worse. Nobody told him anything. All day long and all night long, the powder fell on the island. People were sick, diarrhea, stomachache, ache all over their body. The next day, their hair fall out.
The majority of those receiving the heaviest radiation.
And this guy named Oscar Dubroom said, everybody get on board. If you're thinking about staying back, you're gonna die.
How Arth? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, the son of the morning? Thou art cut down to the ground. How does weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the throne of BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, and I will set the congregation in the sides of the north. Man, they sit in North America. I will ascend above the height of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Yet thou hast brought thee down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that nearly look at thee, that nearly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, this is the man that did wicked, that this is the man, so it's clearly talking about a race of people, a man. This is the man that made the earth to tremble, to shake the kingdoms, man. We watch him shake the kingdoms, man, with the 1,000 nuclear bombs, atomic bombs that they've been testing. That made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, man. Made the world as a wilderness. People can't even live, man. These people got all type of nasty diseases. Made the world as a wilderness and destroy the cities, and open not the houses of his prisoners. And man, they got the most populated prisons in the world. I'm talking about all these terrible countries, man. All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, every one in his own house. But thou shalt be cast out the grave like an abominable branch, as of the raiment of those who are slain, thrust through with the sword, and go down to the stone of the pit as a carcass trodden underfoot, man. Man, that's a lot, man.
Everybody got on board.
229 Marshall Islanders and 28 American service personnel were evacuated to Kwajalein for survey and treatment.
Hundreds of lives were harmed and disrupted, all to test these deadly bombs. And this history of colonization and destruction isn't taught in American classrooms.
The Marshall Islands is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Benedict Madison wants to make sure that both Marshallese and Americans don't forget about this history.
Around World War I, Japan took over the Marshall Islands.
The Caroline and Marshall Islands, which were mandated to Japan after the World War, and which she seized for her own when she left the League of Nations.
They were pushed out by the Americans in 1944.
Out of the war, the United States inherit many new Pacific islands.
And soon right after, the United States was looking for a place where they could test nuclear weapons.
Even though the US had killed more than 200,000 people by dropping nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and The very next year, it decided to test even more nuclear weapons.
In 1946, Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands was the scene of the first of these tests. This was Operation Crossroads.
Over the next 12 years, there were other operations too. Operation Sandstone.
And I will stand by my watch and set me upon the tower, and I will watch to see what will say unto me, what will I enter when I am reproved. And the Lord Yahweh answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain about tables, that he may run that readeth it, man. And so we're supposed to make the vision of the Lord, the prophecy, clear, and make it easy to understand, so people could hear the word, and man, and they read it, man. You tell them the word, man, so they can read what that understand. They could run on, man. They could run up, man. Run up with the word. Yeah, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Behold, the soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but just shall live forever. Also because he transgressed by wine, by that vain philosophy, especially we saw with the political hitman, the vain philosophy. Neither keepeth at home. With every video, the military bases, to the nukes, and to the political assassin, and they don't keep it at home. But who enlarges his desire is hell, and is at death in every situation. The desire, and it ends up to death. It turns every situation to hell, and it cannot be satisfied. But he gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these things take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, well, to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with the clay, say that say they not rise up suddenly and bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, thou shall be for booty unto them. Man, so we're gonna see Esau be to booty to all the nations they booty for treasure, because thou hast spoiled many nations, and all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee. Because, man, and the only people that will especially be left have been spoiled by, man, only people here on earth really have been only spoiled by America, but especially as that day, right before that day appears, man, everybody is just going to be so completely spoiled, man. These people are going to turn up. Because, the remnant of the people shall spoil thee because of men's blood, and for the city of the land, and the city, and of all that dwell within, woe to him that covet and evil covetousness to his house, and he may sit with his net. And man, look, and what is the house? Man, what they call the politicians, what they call that, the house, man. They call the House Senate, man, Pentagon. So, man, on the Pentagon, they just bring in the evil covetousness just to the house. Evil covetousness to his house. He may set his nest on high, Obadiah, and he may be delivered from the power of evil. Daniel 8:25. And through his policy, this is talking about Antiochus, but from the Greeks, man, that's they say that's the start of the system, that's the beginning of civilization, which clearly Alexander the Great was a conqueror. There were the Greeks before Alexander the Great, but Alexander the Great was a conqueror. All the civilizations before then, how many? Even at that point, it already had a couple thousand years, man, of history, man. I really wanted to. But this talking about Antiochus, but I believe body is Antiochus in the reincarnation. They keep that democracy alive, man. They quote this period. So through his policy also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart by peace. So that's why peace is the big word that's been said. So by peace shall destroy many. He also shall stand up against the prince of princes and be broken without hands. That's what
Greenhouse, Ivy, Hardtack, and Operation Castle, with the devastating Bravo explosion.
Because of his remoteness and also because of his small indigenous population, the United States chose the Marshall Islands.
These islands in the Pacific, Bikini, Kwajalein, and Eniwetok, were chosen because no populated areas would be put in danger.
But populated areas were put in danger.
All of those exposed were taken to Kwajalein, where complete physical examinations were carried out. We had to watch the radiation doses received.
They stripped them naked. So these men, they saw their mother, their sister, their grandmothers naked.
And that's all 3 unclean spirits, you know. And those 3 unclean spirits goes to, you know, the political, economic, and religious systems. So, you know, you got the Vatican, you got their religious systems. You got the White House, you got the Pentagon, you know, that's the military. You've seen, man. Ain't no more powerful organization. And you got, I mean, you know, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C., all that, you know, that's connected. And here you have the financial system, the banking system, you know. That really is run out of, like, Britain, Europe. I mean, out of, like, you know, Europe. Out of, the UK, I believe. You know? I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out the mouth of the dragon, the mouth of the beast, and out the mouth of the false prophet. For these are the spirits working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth, of the whole world, to gather them to battle on the great day of BAHASHAM Almighty. BAHASHAM Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keep his garment, lest he walk naked and they see the same. He gathered them together in a place called Armageddon in the Hebrew tongue. We're gonna see that.
Right in front of them.
Nason said that this happened for 3 months.
After the natives were evacuated, radiation survey teams were flown back to the exposed atolls, where studies were made and water and soil samples taken.
After 3 years in exile, the people of Rongelap were sent back.
My uncle said, "Are you really going to take us back to Rongelap when it's still contaminated?" They said, "It's true, it's contaminated, but it's not dangerous. You can live on it."
Nason says that's when the medical problems started.
I was 4 years old at the time. My mom and dad, our family, went on the trip back to the island. I grew up on the island. I remember people get really, really sick all the time. Babies were born and no shell to the back of their head, you know. You can see their brain.
When the radiation affects the cell and it affects the genetics, the DNA, then instead of making the normal products, it'll make the abnormal products.
That's Dr. Sheldon Ricklin. He's the only Marshallese doctor in the continental United States.
You got your immediate effects, your acute effects, and so in terms of the beta burns that people that experienced during that time, the thyroid nodules and the thyroid cancers, the malformed babies, jellyfish babies, some people call them.
Some of these images are intensely graphic, but it's important to show what the aftermath of Castle Bravo was.
When you think about radiation, when you think about nuclear weapons or nuclear testing, the first thing that usually comes into mind is the direct effect in terms of cancers.
Nason says she lost many relatives to cancer and other diseases she suspects were caused by nuclear radiation.
My Uncle Don died. He died. His son, Leggett, he had leukemia. I think it's cancer in the blood.
Nason's family brought her cousin Leggett to the U.S. for treatment, but it was too late.
He never saw the island again. He went back in a box. My cousin Rosie, like I told you, he was on top of a tree when that happened. He ran into the ocean and it got worse.
But it was never enough.
And when we ran out of those, we will eat whatever we can eat on the island.
So when the rations ran out, the Marshallese on Rongelap had to eat the contaminated vegetables and fish.
You have blister in your mouth, in your throat. You get diarrhea. You get sick. They come and check us every year, but they never really tell us that we were, living in a contaminated place.
Even though the United States knew that the people of Rongelap were dying from leukemia and other cancers, the U.S. government didn't help evacuate
Nothing is more epic than the build-up before an NFL game. Now DraftKings gets you.
Those way of living, where you get your food, what type of foods you're able to eat. You cannot eat from the ocean anymore because it's radioactive. You cannot gather your foods from the islands because it's radioactive. And you substitute that with canned goods, with preserved foods, with all these foods that are not healthy, that are not your normal Marshallese diet. That definitely has an effect on the health today of Marshallese and health today of Marshallese in the future.
So what has the U.S. done in response to all the damage from nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands? Well, in the late 1980s, it promised $150 million in a trust fund as compensation to the Marshallese people suffering medical problems. But that money, distributed over time across all the people who had been harmed, doesn't amount to much.
$35 a quarter for one person.
$35 every 3 months. That's what Nason receives from the U.S. government for making her homeland uninhabitable.
There was over $100, but now it's $35 a quarter. Can you live on that?
Nason left the
$35 and a quarter.
Islands in the 70s and now lives in northwest Arkansas. And she loves playing with her dogs.
Biggie. That's French Rosie, and that's milkshake.
Even though she can't go back to Rongelap Atoll because it's contaminated, Mason says she wants to spend her retirement on another atoll back in the Marshall Islands.
I've been here too long. I came in 75. I've been working all my life. I want to go back and relax. Sit by the ocean on the beach. Be a bee bum.
And here in Arkansas, where the Marshallese population numbers more than 15,000, a new generation of Marshallese is keeping the history of the island's nuclear legacy alive. In part 2 of this series, we explore how the Marshallese community moved to Arkansas and what's causing this mass migration.
Aren't they, man, he's not destroying the earth? They can't even live on the island.
How many wars is the United States fighting right now? Well, one answer is 0. Under the Constitution, Congress must declare war, and the last countries Congress declared war on were Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary, members of the Axis powers. That was in 1942. That's right. The United States has not declared war on any country since 1942. 8 decades, 0 wars. America must be one of the most peaceful countries on earth. But as you know, that's not the reality. America is still fighting wars around the world. It just doesn't want to call them wars. In recent years, the United States has been fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. 7 different countries, and those are just the ones the Pentagon officially acknowledges. The actual scope of American war-making is wider. Researchers at Brown University recently counted 14 countries in which U.S. troops were engaged in combat to fight terrorism. And then there are the forces of the United States stationed indefinitely overseas as part of a massive network of allies and partners. Take the Middle East. U.S. troops number around 13,000 in Kuwait, another 13,000 in Qatar, 7,000 in Bahrain, around 78,000 remain in Japan and South Korea, and that's not even getting to Germany, Djibouti, Cuba, Romania, and so on. In all, America stations about 200,000 service members overseas because it has committed them to protect by force about 1/3 of all the countries in the world. Where does that leave the other 2/3, home to most of humanity? The answer is on the receiving end. Over the last 20 years, the United States has dropped an average of 46 bombs and missiles on other countries each day. In 2016, Barack Obama's last year in office, the United States dropped upwards of 26,000 bombs on 7 countries. But not to worry, America's coercive power is not supposed to be for war. It's for military-led operations, police actions, or humanitarian interventions, bombings or surgical strikes. And of course, there's the inevitable collateral damage, a term the U.S. military created during the Vietnam War as a euphemism for dead, innocent people. At least America used to have a Department of War, calling it what it was. But in 1949, the Department of Defense was born, and the American military began to pioneer a language of sterile obfuscation to describe the brutal realities of war. The problem goes well beyond language, of course. Over decades, America has perfected the art of isolating itself from the wars it wages. On TV, wars play out like simple dramas, us versus them, with no blood and no casualties unless perhaps they're inflicted by the enemy. Americans rarely see images of combat. To judge from most broadcasts, war involves firing missiles into the sky and admiring the beauty of our weapons, to quote one anchor. And the people America sends to war, they're increasingly separated from the rest of society. Since the draft ended in the 1970s, the government moved to an all-volunteer force, and it relies as much as possible on technology like drones that keep American casualties to a minimum. So the wars America conducts take place largely outside of public view. It was only when 4 U.S. soldiers were killed in Niger in 2017 that many Americans learned we had troops there in the first place. Although the system perpetuates itself like a self-licking ice cream cone, U.S. leaders have a theory of the case. Military dominance, they say, is supposed to achieve peace through strength. This theory guided American leaders in the 1990s after the Soviet Union fell, leaving the United States with undisputed power. During the Cold War, the United States built an apparatus of military alliances and bases to contain Soviet communism. Once the Soviet enemy had collapsed, America had an opportunity to scale back its military footprint, invest the gains at home, and let other countries manage their own affairs. But instead of pulling back, planners in the Pentagon vowed to maintain a predominant military position, so great as to prevent any potential rival from even aspiring to a larger role in their own regions. No one would dare to take their own initiative, not even U.S. allies, who would stay subordinate to the United States. The result? Of all the times the United States has used armed force since 1946, roughly 80% of those interventions have taken place after 1991. That's right, the United States has used force more frequently after the Cold War than during it, and it's not even close. Despite the promise of peace through strength, peace has not come. Quite the contrary. Armed supremacy, assumed to ensure peace,
by peace shall destroy many,
produced endless war. In the 1990s, the United States began to station tens of thousands of soldiers in the Middle East. Suddenly, it found a cavalcade of enemies in the region who resisted American aims. Take Afghanistan. After 9/11, the United States did not merely go after the terrorists responsible for the attack and punish their sponsors. Instead, America tried to transform Afghanistan. It set out to build a brand new Western-style centralized state, applying what was supposed to be overwhelming strength to impose peace. It soon became clear that, in the words of the Lieutenant General, who for 6 years was the White House's chief advisor on the war, and I quote, "We didn't know what we were doing." The United States tried to build Afghan security forces, only to find they couldn't do the job. The United States tried to build a thriving market economy, only to see the opium trade become the only thriving part of the Afghan economy. The United States tried to build a liberal democracy, but in doing so empowered warlords and fueled corruption. So the Taliban mounted an insurgency and made steady gains. Now it controls the country and enjoys its strongest position since the war began in 2001. For Americans, war has come to appear normal, inescapable, eternal. It has no declared beginning and no end in sight. That's what makes them endless wars, not just that they are long, but also that they lack a worthy and achievable purpose. The United States has trapped itself. Pursuing military dominance has generated unnecessary enemies. These enemies, in turn, have made dominance costlier and more dangerous. That's why year after year, the United States seems to grow ever more threatened and ever less safe, according to the very leaders responsible for that result. It's as though the most powerful nation on earth has no control over its conduct. No choice but to keep spending more on the military than the next 11 countries combined. As Americans struggle to address urgent needs at home,
Their government has committed them to the endless defense of places across the world, places we often make more dangerous. Instead of strengthening ourselves and helping to build a world safe for diversity, we've chosen to build an empire or something all too close. And if we continue the quest for dominance, the consequences will get even worse, and we will all be weaker for it. I'm Stephen Worth. I'm Director of Grand Strategy at the Quincy Institute for the Gravel Institute.
Man, we be seeing all these other countries move. We be seeing these other countries' atrocities, but we still cannot forget. We still cannot forget, man, who the bloody man is. Yeah, okay, I think I can hit this one. I can be done.
Running while black is not running from anything. It's pushing forward, having everything. Communal. Powerful. We are here.
So these are the exact same forces that just a week ago were in a fierce gun battle with the people suspected of killing President Moise. We're heading to his presidential mansion right now. They're going to take us there to show us what went down.
On July 7th, Haiti's President Jovenel Moise was gunned down in his home overlooking the city of Port-au-Prince. So far, no one knows who's behind the assassination or why he was killed.
What does it say about a country when the president in his own home is killed? We are doing our best, but it's not easy for us. This is not.
Let the matter, this matter is by the decree of the watchers, and by the decree of the word of the holy ones, in the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and he giveth to whomever he will. And he set it up the basis of men, and he's setting up the lowest of men, man. I hope that lets you see something, man. This is the lowest of men. And the lowest of men got all these people scared, so it made you forget, man. He is the lowest of men. And look, man. Revelation 17. And there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and he talked with me, saying, Come hither, I shew unto the judgment of the great whore that sitteth on many waters, with whom the king of the earth hath committed fornication, and the inhabitants of earth has been made drunk with fornication. He carried me away in spirit into the spirit of the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet covered beast, colored full of names of blasphemy, with having 7 heads and 10 horns. And man, that's NATO. That's where the man had his internship. And the woman was, this is a metaphor. Lily saw a woman, he didn't know. So, the woman was arrayed in purple, and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, and having a great cup in her hand, full of abomination and filthiness to her fornication, man. And upon her forehead was written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And we're seeing it, man. That's America. We're seeing how America's been really the mouthpiece of this beast, And the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahawashi. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration, man. People wondered, man. And the angel said unto me, where thou sittest, where didst thou marvel? I tell the mystery of the woman and the beast that carried her, with 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that solace was and is not. You know, it didn't exist yet. You know, because it's not the same beast. You know, the old one that fell apart. This is new one. So it was the one before, but it's not the same one. It's the new one. Shall ascend out the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell on earth shall wonder, whose names were written in the book of heaven, or written in the book of life. And go into perdition, and that dwell under the heaven shall, and they that dwell under heaven shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and is yet. And here is the mind which hath wisdom, 7 heads and 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth, and there was 7 heads, and 5 were fallen, and 1 is, and one is not yet come. When he cometh, we have a short span, and the beast that was and is not, but even is the 8th, is of the 7th, going to perdition. The 7th is Britain, I believe, and the 8th is Matthew. And the 10 horns, which solace the 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but gain the power, but will receive power as 1 hour with the beast. And these have 1 mind, and shall give their power unto the strength of the beast, man. And that's NATO. So I'm playing this.
Army. So that kind of battle that having place here is, I think it's something that might be controlled. So these are the exact same forces that just a week ago were in a fierce gun battle with the people suspected of killing President Moise. We're heading to his presidential mansion right now. They're going to take us there to show us what went down.
On July 7th, Haiti's president Jovenel Moise was gunned down in his home overlooking the city of Port-au-Prince. So far, no one knows who's behind the assassination or why he was killed.
What does it say about a country when the president in his own home is killed? We are doing our best, but it's not easy for us. This is not the army. So that kind of battle that having place here is, I think it's something that might be controlled by an army.
That's what it would have taken.
I think so.
What comes next?
We'll see. We were doing police work, and that's it. For the rest, this is up to the politicians.
Haitian investigators and the FBI have left the scene outside the president's mansion largely untouched. Not a single member of the president's guard was injured or killed in the attack.
Everything I did for him, and no matter what, nothing was ever good enough.
Below the president's house, families live in a row of modest homes.
After the president's been killed, do you feel safe? So this woman's house backs up to President Moise's presidential mansion, and they share a wall. And up here on top, you can actually see a pretty good view of the president's house. Now, up here on the hill is a police tower, a guard tower, and we're told that was unmanned the night that he was assassinated. Why do you think that guard tower was unmanned? It was like a routine. So sometimes they have people, sometimes they don't. So. Just luck of the draw that night? Seems a little strange, no? Well, I don't know. And would it have been a Haitian National Police that would be up in that guard tower? Yeah. So this really falls on the Haitian National Police. Well, you might say that. I mean, how does that make you feel in the position that you're in? Very uncomfortable. This is a shame. This shouldn't have happened. No.
So far, 18 former Colombian special forces and 2 Haitian Americans are in custody for the assassination. 3 Colombians have been killed, and 5 remain at large. 2 competing prime ministers were both claiming the right to rule until this week, and the country's Senate has put its own leader forward as the rightful president. But Haitian politics has, for a long time, included other power brokers.
So you can't really talk about the security and political situation here in Haiti in recent years without mentioning one gang in particular that's had its grip on Port-au-Prince.
G9 is a powerful federation of gangs who rule neighborhoods across the capital. Jimmy Cherizier, aka Barbecue, is their leader. He's reported to have had links with Moise's government, and the president's death is a major blow to his influence in Haiti. He says that's not the case.
En pile moun qui dans la police, en pile moun qui dans pouvoir, en pile moun
qui dans opposition, c'est eux qui fait complot à bourgeois senti pour livrer le président. Son complot national et international contre le peuple haïtien. N'a répété ça encore. Peuple a pour dans la rue et n'a pratiqué ça qui est légitime violence. Et n'a répété encore nous c'est grand monde, yo tiré sur nous compte ça pour nous faire. Merci.
Cherizier is a former cop accused of carrying out neighborhood massacres and overseeing the kidnap for ransom gangs that are terrorizing the city, which he denies. At least for now, he rules several neighborhoods in Port-au-Prince.
Do you see G9 and yourself as a legitimate authority here in Haiti?
Nous connaissons que nous sommes force politique, nous sommes structure sociopolitique, sont structure sociopolitique cap goumé pour moun ki pi mal yo pour nous comment nous capable.
A social political movement that carries around pretty large weapons and gets into gun battles with other social political movements.
Même comme leader responsable, nous prenons des dispositions pour protéger la population là kay nous.
But Cherizier's influence extends well beyond his neighborhoods. Since the assassination, he's threatened an all-out insurrection against Haiti's political class.
M'a goumé contre un système qui senti, m'a goumé contre un système qui corrompu. M'a goumé contre moun qui pi riche men pays à côté lié jodi là. Moun pas jamais senti insécurité a. Jodi aller pour insécurité arriver sur moun sa yo. Moun pas jamais senti ça krele ou dormi la kayou. Bal ap tirer. Jodi aller pour bal tirer contre moun sa yo et tout.
I see you getting emotional. What do you think is bringing tears to your eyes?
C'est américain. Ouais comment moun vit aux États-Unis pas vrai? Est-ce que vous voulez mener la saline pour regarder comme côté moun a dormi? Est-ce que vous voulez mener Delmadé pour regarder côté moun, pour regarder côté ti moun a vivre? Yeah, on va parler de misère comme ça. Ok, yes. Ça le bois acheter là. Dis-moi mon message pour y bailler.
But it's the people in poor neighborhoods that often suffer the worst at the hands of the gangs. This woman was making between $1 and $10 a day when kidnappers took her 5-year-old daughter. She's still afraid for her safety, so we're hiding her identity.
Et puis, m'tendons l'autre cri encore. Là, moi sorti, moi je n'ai deux messieurs sur moto.
Can you describe what the people who took your daughter, what they looked like?
Et ça me dit, ouais, ce monsieur, c'était Mario qui était sous yo à Port-à-Lantins. Bon, monsieur pas de cagoule. Yo kidnappé lui dimanche, il fait lundi, mardi, non mercredi, il relève. Il dit, madame, on va $4,000 américains. Dit, mes amis, bon Dieu, papa, je vais 4,000 petits roches, qui dit, je vais $4,000 américains. Dans dimanche, c'est comme ça, je me campé, je me tape balai, et puis je me donne monsieur, dit, monsieur, à de quoi son boule petit, tu tué, non, monsieur. L'aime courir sorti dehors. Il dit, al soupon après. Et puis, je cours pied à terre, là, qui balai à terre. Je cours pied à terre, mal gardé. L'aime rive moi, c'est petit moi. Parce que je ne pense petite femme que tu as tué, dans l'état pareil ça. Et comment bagaille que tu fait petit.
What do you think they did?
Mais c'est violé.
Who do you think is responsible?
Bon. Autorité. Il est responsable parce que c'est eux-mêmes qui m'ont fait kidnapping. Ça me dit, c'est le président qui a mis eux. Puis moi, un bon ange malheureux, il faut le bon ange grand nègre là tout. Et ça me dit. C'est pour vraiment peur parce que ou pas quand on cartouche marron sorti. Ou vient prendre, on est capable de victime n'importe qui gens, là qui cause. Après bon Dieu dans celle-là.
Despite President Moïse's assassination, life in Haiti seems to have returned to normal. But the normal Haitians are used to is violence.
So we just arrived at the Petronville police station. We were about to start an embed with the Haitian National Police. Right as we were walking out to the car, we heard gunshots outside of the gates of the police station. They are doing that almost every week. And so guys just come up to them, shoot and rob them.
Shoot and rob them.
The cops set up a roadblock in the neighborhood market, and officers spent nearly an hour shaking people down.
What happened for the last 20 years, the state lost its power. So people are not afraid of the authorities here anymore. But we have to restore the authority of the state.
They weren't able to find the shooter, but we heard later that a suspect had been killed by police and quickly taken to the morgue.
Are the police at this moment able to protect people, Haitians, from gangs and kidnappers?
Well, this is going on a daily basis for us. The institution needs help.
I pray that this lesson is edifying. Call halal Yahawah. I hope this lesson was edifying. Call halal Yahawah.